There is a specific kind of silence that descends upon a life that is still running, but no longer going anywhere. It is not the silence of peace, but the silence of a motor idling in neutral, consuming fuel but producing no forward movement. You are present. You are performing. You are meeting expectations. You show up on time, complete your tasks, respond to messages, fulfill obligations. From the outside, the architecture of your life appears intact. But somewhere beneath the surface, beneath the routine and the responsibility, a quiet voice has begun to ask a question that feels almost dangerous to acknowledge. What if I simply stopped? Not in a dramatic collapse, not through a crisis, not because of failure, but by gently laying down the weight of a path that has stopped meaning anything. This thought does not arrive like a wave of despair, sweeping you off your feet. It arrives like a reasonable conclusion, a calm assessment of diminishing returns. And that reasonableness is precisely what makes it so seductive, so difficult to argue against. Because when the mind presents quitting as logic, not emotion, when it feels like the smart choice rather than the scared choice, you are already standing at a psychological crossroads most people never even realize they have reached. The question is not whether you will move forward or backward. The question is whether you will recognize where you are standing before you make a decision that will echo through the rest of your life. Part 1. The fatigue without a name. There is exhaustion that comes from effort, and then there is exhaustion that comes from meaninglessness. The first is cured by rest, by sleep, by a weekend away, by simply stopping long enough for the body to repair itself. The second is not cured by anything the world can provide, because it is not the body that is tired. It is not even the mind, in the conventional sense. It is the soul's connection to its own reasons for moving. It is the thread that ties your daily actions to your deeper sense of purpose. And when that thread frays, nothing you do feels like it belongs to you anymore. You wake up. You go through the motions. You complete the checklist. You might even accomplish a great deal. But the inner experience is not one of living. It is one of enduring. Each task becomes heavier, not because it requires more physical energy, but because it requires more psychological force to justify. You begin to notice that you are pushing yourself to do things that used to happen naturally, automatically, even joyfully. Conversations require effort, as if you are translating your thoughts from a language you no longer speak fluently. Decisions require second-guessing, as if the internal compass that once pointed north has lost its magnetism. Even small choices, what to eat, what to wear, whether to attend a gathering, feel like they are wading through a thick fog where nothing is clear and everything costs more than it should. This is not burnout in the conventional sense, though burnout is the closest word the culture has for it. Burnout implies you have given too much, that you have exceeded some limit and now need to replenish. But this is different. This is giving the same amount, sometimes even less, and receiving nothing back in return. The exchange rate between your effort and your inner nourishment has collapsed. You are putting coins into a machine that no longer dispenses anything, and yet you keep putting coins in, because the machine used to work, because everyone else is still using their machines, because you don't know what else to do with your coins. Modern culture has very few words for this state. It is not depression, because you can still function, you can still laugh, you can still connect with others on a surface level. It is not laziness, because you are still trying, still showing up, still carrying your load. It is not failure, because on paper nothing has gone wrong. Your relationships are intact, your career is stable, your health is acceptable. So you are left in a kind of psychological no man's land, where the problem has no name and therefore no obvious solution. You try the usual remedies: more sleep, a short break, a change of scenery, a vacation, a new hobby, and for a brief moment something lifts. The fog parts. You feel a flicker of the old energy. But within days, Sometimes within hours, the same heaviness returns, because the scenery has changed but the internal relationship to your own life has not. You are still living inside a story that has stopped generating meaning, and no amount of external adjustment can fix an internal misalignment. Think of a radio that is tuned to the wrong frequency. You can increase the volume. You can move the radio to a different room. You can buy better speakers. But until you adjust the tuning, you will only get static. The static might be louder. It might come from a different direction, but it will still be static. This is what it feels like to live in a structure that no longer resonates with your inner frequency. You can try harder. You can rest more. You can change your environment. But the fundamental misalignment remains. And the longer it remains, the more you begin to doubt yourself. You wonder if something is wrong with you. You wonder if you have lost something permanent. You wonder if everyone else feels this way and simply hides it better. But the truth is simpler and harder to accept. You have outgrown the container of your life. And now, the container is squeezing you. Part 2. The structure that outlived its purpose. Every human life is built upon structures. These are not physical things you can touch, but psychological frameworks. The roles you occupy, the goals you pursue, the identity you have constructed over years of choices and reinforcements. In the beginning, these structures serve you. They give you direction, stability, a sense of who you are and where you belong. You build a career, you form relationships, you adopt beliefs, you develop habits, and for a long time this architecture holds you upright. It protects you from the chaos of pure possibility. It gives you a story to tell yourself and others about what your life means. But structures are not alive. They do not grow. They do not adapt. They only exist, rigid and unchanging, while you continue to change whether you want to or not. Time passes. Experience accumulates. You are not the same person who built those structures, but the structures remain, demanding that you continue to fit inside them. And there comes a point in every life, if you are paying attention, when the structure that once supported you begins to confine you. It does not become bad. It does not become wrong. It simply becomes obsolete. It no longer has room for who you have become. The problem is that obsolescence is hard to detect, because the structure still looks intact. From the outside, everything is in place. You are still the person with the job, the role, the identity, the relationships. You still occupy the same positions in the same social architecture. But from the inside, you are no longer inhabiting it. You are merely occupying it, going through the motions, playing a part that used to be you, but now feels like a costume that doesn't quite fit. Think of a tree that has grown inside a small enclosure. Perhaps the enclosure was built to protect it when it was young, to shield it from animals or harsh weather. For years, that enclosure was a blessing. It allowed the tree to take root, to establish itself, to survive when it was vulnerable. But as the tree grows, as its trunk thickens and its branches spread, the enclosure that once protected it now prevents it from expanding. The tree does not suddenly die. It does not collapse. It simply stops growing. It survives, but it no longer reaches toward the sky. It becomes a stunted version of what it could have been, not because anything attacked it, but because it stayed too long in a container that was never meant to be permanent. This is the condition of a life that has outlived its psychological architecture. You are surviving, but you are not expanding. You are maintaining, but you are not creating. The energy that once flowed toward growth, toward exploration, toward the excitement of becoming, now flows entirely toward maintenance. And maintenance, over time, becomes a kind of slow atrophy. You begin to feel that you are shrinking into the shape that was built for you, rather than growing into the shape that is trying to emerge from within. The tree does not know it is stunted. It only knows that it cannot seem to get any taller. And you do not know that you have outgrown your life. You only know that something fundamental has gone out of it. Some juice, some spark, some sense of possibility that used to be there and now is not. The psychological term for this process, in the tradition of Carl Jung, is enantiodromia. It is the principle that over time, everything transforms into its opposite. The structure that gave you freedom eventually becomes a prison. The identity that gave you confidence eventually becomes a mask. The path that once felt like a journey, an adventure, a movement towards something meaningful, eventually feels like a treadmill, endless movement that arrives nowhere. You are moving, but you are no longer going anywhere. The scenery changes, but the inner landscape remains flat and featureless. This is not a failure of effort. It is not a lack of discipline or vision or ambition. It is a natural consequence of staying too long in a form of life that has completed its purpose. The tragedy is not that you built the structure. The tragedy is that you forgot it was temporary. You forgot that every container is meant to be outgrown. You forgot that the purpose of a structure is to serve your development, not to become the definition of it. Part 3. The in-between. When the old structure no longer holds you, but the new one has not yet appeared, you enter a territory that has no map, no signposts, no familiar landmarks. In psychological and spiritual traditions across cultures, this is often called the liminal space, from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold. It is the space between what was and what will be, between the identity you have worn out and the identity you have not yet grown into. And the defining feature of a threshold is that you cannot live on it. You can only pass through it. It is not a destination. It is a passage. But passing through requires a kind of surrender that the ego finds almost unbearable. Because on a threshold, there are no guarantees. There is no certainty. There is no reassurance that you are doing the right thing or going the right way. There is only the raw, uncomfortable, often terrifying experience of not knowing who you are anymore. This is where the feeling of being stuck is born. But being stuck is a misleading description, a trick of perception. It implies that you have stopped moving, that you are paralyzed, that you are going nowhere. In reality, you are moving very deeply. You are moving inward. You are moving away from the surface of your life, away from the roles and routines and identities that have defined you, and toward the foundations, the bedrock, the raw material of your being. But because this movement does not produce visible results, because it does not show up on resumes, or in social updates, or in the approval of others, you interpret it as stagnation. You are not stagnating. You are descending. And descent, in psychological terms, is the prerequisite for any authentic transformation. You cannot rise to a new level of being without first descending into the depths where that new being can be formed. In the ancient myths, the ones that have survived for thousands of years because they describe truths that do not change, every hero must enter the underworld before they can return with the treasure. Think of Odysseus, who must journey to the land of the dead to receive the knowledge he needs to find his way home. Think of Aeneas, who descends into the underworld to speak with his father and learn the future of his people. Think of Inanna, who descends through 7 gates, shedding a piece of her identity at each one, until she stands naked and powerless before her sister in the underworld, only to be reborn and return transformed. The underworld is not a place of punishment, though it feels like one when you are in it. It is a place of reckoning. It is where the old self must die so that a new self can be born. It is where you confront everything you have been avoiding, everything you have hidden from yourself, everything that has been waiting in the darkness for you to finally pay attention. But modern life has no rituals for the underworld, no initiations, no elders to guide you through, no ceremonies to mark the passage. You are expected to move seamlessly from one phase to the next, without pause, without dissent, without grief, without the necessary darkness that precedes every genuine rebirth. So when the underworld opens beneath your feet, when the ground of your identity gives way and you find yourself falling, you have no framework for understanding it. You think you have failed. You think you have lost your way. You think something is wrong with you that needs to be fixed. But in truth, you have simply arrived at the necessary darkness that every human being must pass through if they are to become more than they were. The darkness is not the enemy. The darkness is the womb. Part 4. The resistance at the gate. Here is the paradox that few people understand. The psychological mechanism that has derailed more transformations than almost any other. The closer you get to a real breakthrough, the stronger the resistance becomes. This is not a sign that you are on the wrong path. It is not evidence that you should turn back. It is a sign that you are approaching something real, something that matters, something that the protective structures of your psyche have been working hard to keep you away from. The psyche, the total personality, has a powerful investment in maintaining the status quo. Even a miserable status quo is familiar, and familiarity, to the deep parts of the mind, feels safer than the unknown. The devil you know is always preferable to the devil you don't, even when the devil you know is slowly killing you. So when you begin to approach a threshold of genuine change, when you start to see clearly that the old structure has completed its purpose and that something new is trying to be born, the psyche will deploy every defense it has to pull you back. It will whisper that you are being reckless, irresponsible, naive. It will remind you of all the reasons you should be grateful for what you have. All the people who depend on you. All the obligations you cannot abandon. It will paint the unknown as a threat, as danger, as certain disaster. It will resurrect old fears and create new ones. It will do all of this not because it wants to harm you, but because its primary function is survival, not growth. Its job is to keep you alive, not to help you thrive. And from the perspective of survival, the unknown is always a threat. The cave is safe. The open plain is where the predators are. This is why the desire to quit intensifies at the very moment you are closest to a turning point. You are not quitting because you are weak, though the voice will tell you that you are. You are not quitting because you lack vision or commitment or courage. You are quitting because the part of you that is responsible for keeping you safe, the part that has been doing that job since you were a child, is terrified of what lies ahead. And that terror is real. It is not imaginary. It is not something you can simply dismiss or override. It is a legitimate response from a legitimate part of yourself. But it is not a guide. It is a gatekeeper. And gatekeepers are designed to be passed, not to be obeyed. They test your resolve. They ask if you are sure. They make you prove that you really mean it. But they are not the final authority. They are just the guards at the threshold, and guards can be thanked for their service and gently moved aside. Consider the experience of someone who has spent years in a relationship that has become hollow. They know, on some deep level, that it is over. The connection is gone. The growth has stopped. The love, if it still exists, has become a habit rather than a living thing. But the thought of leaving creates such intense anxiety, such a flood of fear and guilt and uncertainty, that they convince themselves to stay a little longer. They tell themselves they need more certainty, more proof, more reasons. They tell themselves they owe it to the other person, to the history, to the promises that were made. But what they really need is to acknowledge that the terror of the unknown is not evidence that they are wrong. It is evidence that they are human. The same mechanism applies to careers, to identities, to entire ways of life. The resistance at the gate is not a stop sign. It is a toll. And the toll is your willingness to feel afraid and move forward anyway. The toll is your willingness to let the gatekeeper do its job, to feel the fear fully, and then to step through with the fear still present, still real, but no longer in control. Part 5. The cost of turning back. If you turn back at the threshold, if you listen to the gatekeeper and retreat to the familiar territory of the old structure, you do not simply return to where you started. You return carrying a new piece of knowledge, a new experience that will shape everything that follows. You return knowing that when it mattered most, when you stood at the crossroads between the old and the new, you chose safety over truth. And that knowledge does not remain in the past. It does not fade with time. It travels with you into every future decision, every future threshold, every future moment of choice. It becomes a template, a pattern, a script that your psyche will follow again and again. The next time you approach a threshold, the memory of your retreat will be there, whispering that you have already proven you are not the kind of person who crosses into the unknown. The next time a new possibility presents itself, the voice will remind you that you tried that once, or something like it, and you turned back. The next time a truth demands to be lived, you will hesitate, and in that hesitation, the pattern will repeat. You will have reinforced a story about yourself that will take years to undo, years of conscious effort, years of swimming against the current of your own conditioned responses. This is the hidden cost of quitting at the psychological level. It is not about the lost opportunity, though that is real. It is not about the time and energy you invested, though that is also real. It is about the lost trust in yourself. Every time you turn away from a truth that was demanding to be lived, you fracture your relationship with your own inner authority. You teach yourself that your deepest intuitions cannot be relied upon. You learn to override your own signals, to dismiss your own knowing, to silence the voice that was trying to guide you. And over time, you become a stranger to yourself. The voice grows quieter, the intuitions grow fainter. The knowing becomes harder and harder to access. You may continue to function. You may even succeed by external measures, accumulating achievements and approvals and possessions. But internally, you will be living in a state of quiet exile, cut off from the source of your own aliveness, going through the motions of a life that no longer feels like yours. The opposite of this is not constant success. The opposite is not never making mistakes or always choosing correctly. The opposite is integrity. Integrity does not mean never falling. It means that when you arrive at a threshold, you do not lie to yourself about what you see. You do not pretend the old structure is still alive when you can feel that it is dead. You do not manufacture motivation to stay on a path that has ended. You do not convince yourself that the fear is a sign you are wrong. You simply tell yourself the truth, as clearly and honestly as you can. And then you let that truth guide your next step, even if that step leads into fog. Even if that step terrifies you, even if that step means leaving behind everything that has felt safe. Part 6. The deeper psychology of resistance. To understand why the resistance at the threshold is so powerful, so convincing, so difficult to overcome, you have to understand something about the architecture of the human psyche that most people never learn. The conscious mind, the part of you that reads these words, that makes plans and sets goals and evaluates options, is only the smallest part of who you are. Beneath it, supporting it, shaping it in ways you cannot see, lies the vast territory of the unconscious. And in that territory, there are forces that have been operating since long before you had words to describe them. One of those forces is what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is everything you have rejected in yourself. Everything you have deemed unacceptable, everything you have pushed away because it didn't fit the story you wanted to tell about who you are. Your anger, your weakness, your selfishness, your fear, your desire, your darkness. You have spent your entire life building a wall between yourself and these qualities, pretending they don't exist, projecting them onto others, denying them any place in your conscious identity. But the shadow does not go away because you ignore it. It waits. It accumulates. It gathers power in the darkness. And when you approach a threshold of genuine change, when the old structure begins to crumble and the new structure has not yet formed, the shadow sees its opportunity. It rises up. It demands to be seen. It will not be ignored any longer. This is part of what makes the resistance so overwhelming. It is not just the fear of the unknown. It is the fear of meeting yourself, the whole yourself, the parts you have spent a lifetime avoiding. The threshold demands that you become more complete, more whole, more real. And that means facing the shadow, integrating the rejected parts, accepting that you are not just the light but also the darkness, not just the strength but also the weakness, not just the love but also the rage. This is terrifying work. It is no wonder the psyche resists it. It is no wonder the gatekeeper tries to turn you back. The gatekeeper is not just protecting you from the unknown, it is protecting you from yourself. But here is the truth that changes everything. The shadow is not your enemy. It is not something to be feared or eliminated or overcome. It is simply the part of you that has been waiting in the darkness, waiting for you to have enough courage to look at it, waiting to be brought into the light and integrated into the whole. When you refuse to cross the threshold, you are not just refusing the unknown future. You are refusing the unexamined past. You are refusing to meet the parts of yourself that have been calling to you in dreams and symptoms and moments of unexplained emotion. You are refusing to become whole. Part 7. The Quiet Revolution. There is a revolution that happens without banners or declarations, without marches or manifestos. It happens inside people who have reached the end of a structure and refuse to turn back. It happens in the quiet hours of the night when no one is watching, in the small choices that no one else will ever know about, in the private commitments to truth that never make it onto social media. This revolution does not announce itself. It does not seek followers or validation. It simply begins to live from a different center, a deeper axis, a more authentic foundation. The people who undergo this revolution do not look different from the outside. They still go to work. They still have relationships. They still navigate the ordinary demands of ordinary life. But something has shifted internally. They are no longer performing. They are no longer pretending. They are no longer living for the approval of the world. They have stopped trying to be interesting or successful or impressive. They have started trying to be real. And in that shift, they become a quiet evidence that another way is possible. Not a way of greater achievement, but a way of greater truth. Not a way of escaping struggle, but a way of struggling for something that matters. Not a way of avoiding pain, but a way of suffering for something that is worth suffering for. This is the real meaning of the journey you are on. It was never about reaching a specific destination. It was never about getting to a particular point where you could finally relax and feel satisfied. It was about becoming real enough that wherever you end up, you are fully there. It was about developing the capacity to inhabit your own life completely, without reservation, without hiding, without the constant low-grade anxiety that you are somehow failing to be what you should be. The exhaustion, the stuckness, the desire to quit, the resistance at the gate, the fear of the unknown, the shadow rising from the depths. All of it was not obstacles to your development. They were the very mechanisms by which the old self was dismantled so that something more essential could emerge. They were the fire that burned away what was false so that what was true could finally be seen. You did not fail. You completed a cycle. You walked a path to its natural end. And now you are standing at the beginning of something new, something that cannot be seen or planned or controlled, something that will require everything you have and give back everything you are. And now, without needing to know exactly where you are going, without needing to have it all figured out, you can take the next step. Not because the path is clear, but because you are clear. Not because you are certain, but because you are honest. Not because you are fearless, but because you have learned that fear is not a reason to stop. Part 8. The new axis. When you finally stop maintaining the old structure, when you finally stop pouring energy into something that is already dead, when you finally stop pretending that the container still fits, something begins to shift. Not immediately, not dramatically, not in a way that you can point to and say, "There, that is the moment everything changed." But slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, a new axis of life begins to form. It does not form because you figured everything out, because you finally discovered the secret or found the right map. It forms because you stopped pretending. You stopped performing a version of yourself that had expired. You stopped trying to be what you were supposed to be and started allowing yourself to be what you actually are. And in that honesty, you created a space, an emptiness, a fertile void where something authentic could finally begin to grow. This new axis is not built on goals or roles or identities, though it may eventually express itself through them. It is built on alignment. Alignment between your inner truth and your outer life. Alignment between what you feel and what you do. Alignment between the person you are and the person you present to the world. You begin to make choices not because they are expected, not because they are safe, not because they will impress anyone, but because they feel true. You begin to trust the pull of your own curiosity, your own interest, your own excitement, even when it does not lead to obvious outcomes, even when it makes no sense to anyone else, even when it seems to be taking you away from everything you worked for. You begin to value experiences not for their external rewards, but for their internal resonance, for the way they make you feel more alive, more present, more yourself, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you stop living for the approval of the world and start living from the authority of your own depths. The voice of the world, which used to be so loud, so persuasive, so impossible to ignore, becomes background noise. You can still hear it, but it no longer controls you. You can still feel its pull, but you no longer have to follow. You have discovered something more reliable, more trustworthy, more real. The quiet voice of your own truth. The still small voice that has been waiting for you to listen. This is not a destination. It is not a place you arrive at and then stay forever. It is a different way of moving, a different relationship to the journey. The old way was linear, goal-oriented, driven by achievement and comparison, and the desperate need to prove something. The new way is circular, process-oriented, driven by authenticity and presence and the quiet satisfaction of being who you are. You are no longer trying to get somewhere. You are trying to be someone real. And that shift changes everything. It changes how you work, because work becomes an expression rather than an obligation. It changes how you love, because love becomes a sharing rather than a need. It changes how you suffer, because suffering becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. It changes how you rest, because rest becomes a nourishment rather than an escape. Now, every action is connected to an internal source, a deep well of meaning, rather than an external target that can never quite be reached. You are no longer a machine producing results. You are a life expressing itself, a unique and unrepeatable expression of the universal desire to be. Part 9. The Art of Staying. There is an art to staying when everything in you wants to leave. Not staying in the old structure, not staying in the life that has stopped fitting, but staying with yourself through the transition. Staying present to your own experience when it is uncomfortable, when it is confusing, when it is painful. Staying honest about what you feel when it would be easier to numb or distract or pretend. Staying committed to the process even when you cannot see where it is leading. This art is not taught anywhere. There are no courses in it, no books that can fully capture it, no experts who can do it for you. It is learned in the trenches, in the dark nights, in the moments when you want nothing more than to escape your own skin. It is learned by failing and getting back up, by turning back and then turning around again, by making the same mistake 100 times until finally, on the 101st, something clicks, and you do it differently. It is learned through patience, through compassion for your own struggles, through the gradual accumulation of small victories that no one else will ever celebrate. The art of staying requires that you develop a new relationship with discomfort. Most of us have been trained to treat discomfort as a problem to be solved, a signal that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. But in the context of transformation, discomfort is often a signal that something is right, that you are exactly where you need to be, that the growth is happening even though it hurts. The discomfort of the threshold is not a sign that you should leave. It is a sign that you are arriving. The discomfort of facing your shadow is not a sign that you should look away. It is a sign that you are finally seeing. The discomfort of not knowing who you are is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are being found. This does not mean you should seek out discomfort or romanticize suffering. It means you should stop running from it so quickly. Stop assuming that the presence of difficulty means the absence of rightness. Sometimes the most right thing in the world feels terrible. Sometimes the most true path is the one that hurts the most. Sometimes the only way out is through, and the only way through is to stay. Part 10. The Return. In the hero's journey, the final stage is not the transformation itself. It is the return. The hero must bring what they have learned in the underworld back to the surface, back to the ordinary world, back to the people and the life that were left behind. This is often the hardest part, because the ordinary world does not understand what you have been through. It does not see what you have seen. It does not know what you know. And it will try to pull you back into its routines, its assumptions, its comfortable ways of being. The return requires that you integrate your transformation into your daily life. It requires that you find ways to live your truth in a world that often rewards pretense. It requires that you maintain your connection to the depths while navigating the surface. It requires that you be in the world, but not entirely of it. That you participate in the ordinary, while remaining grounded in the extraordinary. This is the final test of the journey. Not whether you can descend, but whether you can return. Not whether you can find yourself, but whether you can bring yourself back. Not whether you can become real, but whether you can stay real when the world around you is still pretending. And this test, like all the others, cannot be passed once and for all. It must be passed every day, every moment, every time you choose truth over comfort, integrity over approval, reality over illusion. There is a moment in every genuine transformation when the only thing left is a quiet commitment to stay with yourself. Not to force anything, not to figure everything out, not to have answers or guarantees or certainty, just to remain present to what is true, even when what is true is uncomfortable, even when it is confusing, even when it asks more of you than you thought you had to give. Just to keep showing up for your own life, your own process, your own becoming, without knowing where it will lead or when it will end. If you are in that moment now, if you are standing at the threshold between what was and what will be, if the old structure has crumbled and the new one has not yet formed, if the desire to quit is whispering in your ear and the resistance is rising in your chest, you do not need answers. You do not need motivation. You do not need someone to tell you it will be okay, because you know that is not guaranteed. You only need to recognize one thing. The desire to turn back is not a command. It is a feeling. It is a response from a part of you that is trying to protect you. A part that has been doing that job for a very long time. And feelings can be felt without being followed. Protectors can be thanked without being obeyed. The threshold is still there. The unknown is still waiting. The new axis is still forming in the darkness. And you, even in your hesitation, even in your fear, even in your exhaustion, are still capable of stepping forward. Not because you are strong, though you may be stronger than you know. Not because you are brave, though courage is often just feeling the fear and moving anyway. But because you are honest. And honesty, in the end, is the only thing that ever really moves anyone anywhere. It is the thread that connects you to yourself. It is the light that guides you through the dark. It is the truth that once lived can never be unlived. Step forward, not toward certainty, not toward safety, but toward yourself. That is the only direction that matters.